Ready for some book recs? Okay, so today I really wanted to kind of do some book comparisons, do some if you like this book, you might like this book, and I figured that I would put together a list of about 12 different books. So you have 6 that are one book, and then 6 that are the books that are kind of compared to the other books, if that makes any sense. I think I just complicated it way too much for you guys, so I'm just gonna get right on into the video. So the first book I want to talk about is Throne of Glass. So if you like Throne of Glass, you might like Bring Me Their Hearts by Sarah Wolfe. So I find these books to be pretty similar, at least in kind of the fantasy that they are, if that makes any sense. I feel like Throne of Glass is a very specific kind of fantasy and is written a very specific kind of way. So if you like the way that Throne of Glass is written, you might really like the way that Bring Me Their Hearts is written. However, their premises are slightly different. And basically, Bring Me Their Hearts is about this girl, and she is a heartless, which are technically zombies, and her heart is being controlled by a witch. And so in order to get her heart back, she has to do something for the witch. And the witch wants her to go to the palace and try to woo the prince and take his heart in replacement for hers. So very different kind of premises, but I felt like when I was reading Bring Me Their Hearts, it definitely reminded me of Throne of Glass, especially in the writing style and the characterizations, and like everything about that just screamed very Sarah J. Maas to me. And I feel like if you liked Sarah J. Maas's Throne of Glass, you might really like Bring Me Their Hearts. The next one is one I actually talked about on Twitter recently, and that is if you liked Hunting Prince Dracula by Kerri Maniscalco, you might really like The Lady Rogue by Jen Bennett. I feel like those two books are so similar, not only in writing style, but also in premise. So I feel like this is also kind of, if you didn't like any of Kerri Maniscalco's books, you might not like this specific Jen Bennett book. I think this might be one of her only like non-contemporary books. So for The Lady Rogue, it's definitely written kind of modern sounding. If you're expecting something that's kind of like The Diviners, where the language is very 1920s, you're not really going to get that in The Lady Rogue. I don't really mind it. Like, language like that doesn't bother me. It's not like a plus or a minus for a book. It's just, if it's well written, I'm going to like it, and it's not a big deal if it sticks to like the language of the times. But the reason I feel like these two books can be really easily compared, not only is the writing style, but it's also the characterization, because I feel like it's not like exactly the same characterization, but it's so similar and it totally works so well. Like the character dynamics are so similar, where you have like a female character who is very intelligent and very strong-willed, and then you have this male character who is kind of like dashing and charming and a little like roguish, if you know what I mean. And I feel like it totally works. Like their just dynamics are so amazing in both books. And also something that is very similar in both of them, they are both taking place in Romania, so that also has something to do with each other. And they both also have to do with Vlad the Impaler. So I feel like there are definitely a lot of similarities between these two books. They're not identical and they're not the exact same story, but they're very similar, and I feel like if you like one of them, you are going to like the other one. And speaking of Kerri Maniscalco's Stalking Jack the Ripper series, if you like Stalking Jack the Ripper, you might also really like Jacobi by William Ritter. This is another one that I try to talk about as much as possible, because I feel like not enough people have read Jacobi and not enough people talk about it. It's such an amazing series. I haven't finished it, but I have read the first 3 books and I love them. They're amazing, and I feel like everyone needs to listen to these audiobooks. Like, both of these series have amazing audiobooks. The Stalking Jack the Ripper series is also narrated by the same person who narrates Jacobi. So if you like those audiobooks, you might like this audiobook. And basically, Jacobi is about this girl, and she is from England, and she comes over to America and is trying to look for a job because she kind of feels like her father isn't really valuing her as much as she wants him to. And so she goes to America, she looks for a job, and she ends up getting hired inspired by this really weird, eccentric person named Jacobi, and they end up solving crimes together, and that's just kind of like the thing. Very similar to Stalking Jack the Ripper in that sort of like writing sense, in sort of the time era, and I just feel like those are two books that are like perfect together. Definitely one that you should read right after you get done with Stalking Jack the Ripper. So if you like The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, you might really like The Crown's Game by Evelyn Skye. These are another two books that have very similar premises. They are both about two magic users, magical people, and they are fighting against each other to become like the ultimate magic person, if that makes any sense. In The Night Circus, it's basically more of like a traveling circus, and the two main characters have to kind of one-up each other in their rooms and like the magical experiences that they create. And in The Crown's Game, it's about these two main characters, and they are both magic users in Imperial Russia, and they have to fight against each other to become the Tsar's enchanter. I think that's what it's called. It might be something different, but you get the gist. Basically the enchanter for the Tsar. And I loved both of these books. So The Crown's Game is actually a duology, whereas The Night Circus is a standalone, so that's where it kind of differs. But I do love The Crown's Game so much. I actually kind of like it more than The Night Circus. So if you weren't like totally sold on The Night Circus, but you liked the idea of it, you might actually enjoy The Crown's Game a lot more. The next one is kind of a fun one. If you like The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, you might actually like The Iron King by Julie Kagawa. So if you didn't know, The Iron King is kind of an older series. I read this one back in high school, but it 100% reminds me of The Cruel Prince. It's very, very similar, mainly in the aspect of it being about a human girl in the fairy world, and there's also kind of like a roguish, charming, but also kind of like semi-evil prince, and I just love both of these series. I love The Cruel Prince. I also love The Iron King. They're both very well written, and despite The Iron King being a little bit older of a series, it has definitely stood up to the test of time, and it's definitely one that I feel like if you haven't checked it out but you like fairies and fae, you might actually want to try it out, because it's definitely a good series and also a very good throwback. If you're looking for something that's a bit more like older YA, this one's for you. It's definitely a good one. If you like Sadie by Courtney Summers, you might also like Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson. So these are two books that I actually read kind of back to back. I read Monday's Not Coming first, and then I read Sadie. But I know that Sadie is kind of the more popular of the two. I feel like I hear more people talk about Sadie, and so I figured that if people like Sadie, they might really like Monday's Not Coming, because they are so similar. Basically, Sadie is told semi through podcast, so that's kind of where they differ. But basically, Sadie's about this girl, and she is trying to figure out who killed her sister, what happened, all of that jazz. And then Monday's Not Coming is about a girl named Claudia, and she is trying to figure out what happened to her friend Monday, who ended up disappearing one day, and no one cared about it. So for me personally, like I said, I enjoyed Monday's Not Coming so much more. I felt like the mystery was done so much better. I felt like the characterization was better. I felt like the story development was better. It just had so much more of a richness of storytelling than Sadie did. I, however, did like the podcast element of Sadie, so if you liked that part of the book, you might not like Monday's Not Coming as much. But if you liked the true crime narrative of Sadie, you might really, really enjoy Monday's Not Coming. I loved that book so much. I can't stop raving about it, and I want everyone to read it. But also for both of those books, trigger warnings for things like death and sexual assault and stuff like that. Definitely go into it knowing that there are going to be some very sensitive topics. However, they're both great in their own ways, and definitely books that could be read back to back. In the very last one, if you liked And I Darken by Kirsten White, you might really like Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan. So I feel like these books are kind of similar in their tone rather than in their actual like content, because technically And I Darken is sort of a retelling of history, whereas Wicked Saints is definitely fantasy. So they are in different genres, but I feel like they're written in such a similar way. I feel like there are definitely similar tones and certain things that they share in common. So Anti-Darkened is kind of like a gender-bent history of Vlad the Impaler. We follow Lada and her brother Radu, and it's amazing, it's wonderful, it's one of my favorite books of all time. Literally, probably my favorite book of all time if I have to admit it. And then Wicked Saints is about this girl, and she has these magical powers. They are given to her by the gods, and she's kind of trying to protect her land just like Lada is in Anti-Darkened. But whereas Lada has more of her bloodthirst, Nadia has her magical abilities. So I feel like they are kind of similar, but Lada is definitely more of a villain and Nadia is a bit more of like a hero, possibly more of like a gray hero. I really, really love these two books, and they both really tackle morality in such a spectacular way. And I feel like they're definitely ones to read if you like anti-heroes, if you like gray morality, if you like villains. These are going to be books that are so right up your alley, it's not even funny. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this video. I definitely had a lot of fun making it and putting together the books. And I will have all the links down below for all these books on Goodreads. So if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Also go ahead and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Goodreads, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!